Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining our presentation today. My name is Claire, I'm a registered dietitian at the UCSF Cancer Center, and Greta is also a dietitian at the Cancer Center and is going to be jumping in a little bit later in the presentation. And today we're going to be talking about a very interesting and emerging area of research, and that is the microbiome. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the microbiome and its relationship to nutrition and cancer. Our objectives today, we're going to be able to describe what is the microbiome, that big buzzword that everyone is talking about. We're going to explore the relationship between the gut microbiome and our overall health, chronic disease, and cancer. We're going to consider the role of the gut microbiome in cancer treatment and learn some practical dietary strategies to support our gut health. So at the end of the presentation, we're going to do a food demo to demonstrate some gut healthy recipes that hopefully you'll be inspired to try at home. Let's start with what is the microbiome. The microbiome is the collection of all microbes such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, and their genes that live on and inside our body. And there's about 100 times as many genes of these microbes as there are human DNA. So, in other words, microbial DNA far surpasses our human DNA. Another fun fact is that the bacteria that lives on and in our body weighs about 3 to 4 pounds. So this large abundance of microbiota plays a very pivotal role in our overall health, which we're going to learn about. A few other terms that you might hear throughout the presentation that we wanted to highlight are dysbiosis, which indicates a microbial imbalance either in the number or type of bacteria. So for example, maybe you have an overgrowth of certain bacteria that are more harmful, or perhaps you have a lower amount of these beneficial bacteria. That would be a dysbiosis, versus a eubiosis, which is the counterpart, is a microbiome that's in balance or a more favorable status. The human microbiome contains about 100 trillion bacteria cells that live in our mouth, in our intestinal tract, in our reproductive tract, in our skin. In fact, we have about 250 microbes that live alone in our mouth, but perhaps the largest microbial population to live inside of our body is our large intestine, which we're going to be referring to as our gut microbiome. And there's actually about 1,000 different types of species of bacteria in our gut and play a very big role in our health. So what do these microbes do for us? Our microbiome has a variety of functions, including regulating and improving our immune function. In fact, about 70% of our immune system resides in our gut. And if you think about it, it makes sense because we're taking in food every single day and our body is constantly assessing, is this a foreign invader, a threat, or is this beneficial for us? Our microbiome also helps prevent the growth of harmful bacteria. It ferments our indigestible food, that fiber that we're eating, and produces byproducts, including vitamin K2, B vitamins, and these molecules called short-chain fatty acids, which we're going to be touching on a little bit later in the presentation. Our microbiome also helps improve our cholesterol levels. It helps support a healthy weight. It regulates our hormones and neurotransmitters. It improves our mood and mental health. So this is a newer area of research where they're finding that our composition of our gut microbiome can play a big role in our mental health because serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's involved in mood, and about 95% of our body's serotonin is produced in our gut. Our microbiome can also improve our oral health, preserve intestinal and mucosal barrier, plays a role in prevention of chronic diseases, in irritable bowel syndrome, preventing certain allergies, and metabolizes procarcinogen and carcinogens. Now, Greta will jump in and dive into the relationship specifically between the microbiome and cancer.
Thank you, Claire. So now let's look at the microbiome and cancer risk. This is an area where there's a lot of research interest and many studies are underway on this topic. Let's look at what is known so far about the microbiome and cancer risk. The microbiome may have both positive and negative effects on cancer risk depending on the specific microbiota. Certain microbes inhibit cancer via positive effects on the immune system and direct killing effects on tumor cells. For example, certain bacteria such as Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Akkermansia muciniphila in the gut produce short-chain fatty acids, specifically butyrate, and butyrate has been shown to play a role in reducing colorectal cancer risk. In contrast, human evidence shows that certain strains of bacteria species of E. coli and Bacteroides fragilis have been linked to promoting colorectal cancers. The pathway by which these microbiota can promote colorectal cancer development are not yet fully understood, but the hypothesized mechanisms are through promoting chronic inflammation and through damaging the DNA of cells. Human microbiome disruption is associated with the promotion of different types of cancer, and currently 10 microbes are classified as carcinogenic by the International Agency for Cancer Research. Of course, other factors influence susceptibility to cancer, so most individuals infected with these pathogenic organisms will not develop cancer. Some examples of cancer-inhibiting bacteria are listed here on this slide. Some of them are from the lactobacillus species, and you'll see that they have protective effects against colon cancer in mouse models through promoting healing of the intestinal tissue and stimulating immunity. Additionally, some bifidobacterium species have been shown to have positive effects on the immune system and protecting the mucosa in mice, and Streptococcus thermophilus has been shown to have inhibitory effects on tumor formation in colorectal cancer mouse models. This slide is a graphic of some of the microorganisms that are associated with the promotion of cancer and the associated cancer types. And so some of the examples that are classified as carcinogens include the human papillomavirus, hepatitis B and C viruses, and the Epstein-Barr virus, among some of the others listed on this slide. Now let's look at the microbiome and cancer treatment. The microbiome and its interaction with cancer treatment is another area of great interest with many research studies ongoing. So far, the evidence is that the microbiome can alter the effects of cancer treatment and also can be affected by these therapies. It's been shown that the microbiome may impact the effectiveness of treatment through several different modes of action, including drug metabolism, immune modulation, and host diet nutrient interactions. And this may account for some of the variability in how people respond to treatment and how they tolerate treatment. Cancer-directed therapies such as chemotherapy and radiation can lead to damage to the villi in the intestine and loss of microbiome bacterial diversity, and subsequently treatment-induced side effects such as diarrhea, mucositis, and tissue atrophy. Here is a graphic that illustrates the potential effects of treatment on the gut microbiome. This is a graphic of the intestinal lining. It illustrates the possible effects of cancer treatment, such as chemotherapy or pelvic radiation, on the cell composition and structure of the intestinal barrier. Starting on one side with the normal, healthy intestinal barrier prior to treatment, and then it shows that with exposure to treatment over time, the villi, which are tiny finger-like projections lining the small intestines that absorb nutrients, can become damaged. You can see reduced production of protective mucus and increased permeability across the membrane barrier. This damage can decrease the protective barrier function of the gut, decrease diversity of the gut microbiome, and may lead to malabsorption of nutrients. After treatment, we see a gradual healing of the intestinal barrier with the villi regrowing, the mucus level returning to normal, and a restoration of the full gut barrier function. So lastly, in terms of microbiome and cancer risk, let's look at the microbiome and immunotherapy. The gut microbiome can modulate the immune system and influences the therapeutic response to immunotherapy. And research is studying how this interaction takes place, and so far various beneficial bacteria have been identified that are listed here on this slide. One study found that people eating a high fiber diet, a diet that was high in fiber from whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, compared to a low fiber diet, and not using a probiotic supplement, lived the longest from immunotherapy. These were patients with melanoma, and research in this area is ongoing. What they're looking at is that this high fiber diet contributes to an increased microbial diversity, beneficial short-chain fatty acid production, and higher numbers of activated T regulatory cells. This latter beneficial effect of the microbiome could contribute to enhancing the immune response to anti-cancer therapy, notably the immunotherapy. So lastly, as part of the topic of cancer treatment and the microbiome, let's look at the microbiome and immunotherapy. The gut microbiome can modulate the immune system and influences the therapeutic response to immunotherapy. Research is studying how the two interplay with each other, and various beneficial bacteria are being identified. Some of them are listed here on this slide. One interesting study found that people eating a high fiber diet and not taking a probiotic compared to those people eating a low fiber diet lived the longest after immunotherapy for melanoma. Research in this area is ongoing. And the people that were eating the high fiber diet were primarily getting their fiber from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. There are several clinical trials to assess and learn more about how probiotics interact with immunotherapy. So more to come on that topic in the future.
Here are some factors that influence the composition of our gut microbiome. Our genetic makeup plays a role. Our child delivery method, so whether we are born from a vaginal birth or C-section, plays a role. And when we're infants, we're just starting to colonize all that gut bacteria. And so how we're fed, breast or bottle fed, also can play a role. In fact, breast milk contains certain oligosaccharides, which act as prebiotics, which are very beneficial for our gut bacteria. Our environment does play a role as well. Things like environmental pollutants, stress, lifestyle, and medications. And as we age, we see microbial abundance and diversity decrease as well. And a lot of these factors, unfortunately, we can't modify. We can't control our age. But what we can control is our diet. And diet could be assumed to be one of the most prominent factors in influencing our gut microbiota composition. In fact, dietary changes can significantly alter our microbiome in as little as 3 days. But our goal is that we want to try to aim for lifelong, sustainable dietary habits to maintain a healthy gut microbiome, because long-term diet has a very large effect on our gut microbiome composition as well. Is there an ideal microbiome? Despite research efforts, there's no consensus on a detailed description of what a normal or healthy microbiota is. And this is just due to the enormous complexity and individual variability that we all have in our microbiomes. So it makes it really hard to achieve with current tools. But what we do know is that there are known parameters that are associated with health. One of them being microbial richness, so the number of species that we have, diversity of these microbiota, and the stability, or in other words, the ability of a community to resist change in the context of stress and return to a state of equilibrium. In other words, what makes a microbiome resilient and strong is both diversity and numbers. Certain diets have different effects on our microbiome. So we see that a Western diet that's often characterized by ultra-processed foods, fast food, low in fiber, and when we're thinking of fiber, we're thinking about our fruits and vegetables and whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. And with a Western diet, we do see reduced numbers of certain beneficial bacteria, including bifidobacteria, lactobacilli, which Greta were mentioning were really healthy for us, and in turn can lead to increased risk of inflammation or chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. Versus a Mediterranean diet, which is characterized by a lot more fiber in the diet, more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, can actually increase diversity and richness of the microbiome, and therefore can reduce risk of chronic disease. Here is a graphic illustrating the Mediterranean diet. And you can see that it's characterized by a plant-based diet that's very high in fruits, vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains, herbs and spices. And at the bottom of the pyramid, this comprises a majority of the diet. And then as you go up the pyramid, you have more moderate amounts of things like fish and seafood, poultry, eggs, and dairy. And at the very top, small amounts of red meats, sweets, and alcohol. One of the many benefits of the Mediterranean diet is that it's very rich in polyphenols. And polyphenols are a class of compounds found in many plant foods, and they're what give a plant its particular color. So many dietary sources of these compounds include fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, certain teas, and grains. For example, your anthocyanins are what make your berries blue, or resveratrol found in grapes, or quercetin found in apples or tea. These are all specific polyphenols that give those plants their color. And there's many benefits, including antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and there's growing evidence showing that dietary polyphenols may play a very big role in our gut health. Specifically, clinical studies are showing that polyphenols can increase these beneficial microbes in the gut and inhibit the growth of pathogenic bacteria, specifically increasing bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, which we learned are two intestinal protective agents in the human gut. And polyphenols can also suppress these Bacteroides or Clostridium, which may be more harmful. And these are done in human studies. Polyphenols can also increase the number of short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria, therefore producing more short-chain fatty acids, which are very anti-inflammatory. And they also have a function in the modulation of our intestinal barrier function, or in other words, strengthening the barrier of our intestinal lining. So all of that is to say, there's a takeaway is that including more plant colors in your diet, you're going to be doing wonders on your gut. You're going to be lowering inflammation, you'll be strengthening the lining of your gut, and producing these metabolites that can lower inflammation and reduce carcinogenesis. Another way I like to think about it is to try to aim for 4 plant colors a day. So for example, if you had your oatmeal this morning and you added blueberries on top with some cinnamon and a side of green tea, you've already hit 3 plant colors. And what you're doing is your microbe is feeding off of those polyphenols and is getting a variety of benefits from that. Another benefit of the Mediterranean diet is that it's very rich in dietary fiber. And dietary fiber is fermented by our human gut microbiota and produces these compounds that we've referred to a few times in this presentation, the short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are used by our gut mucosal cells as energy sources and are very beneficial for human health, including maintenance of intestinal barriers, lowering inflammation, and carcinogenesis. Specifically, the short-chain fatty acid butyrate can have protective effects against the risk of colorectal cancer as well as its progression.
A component of fiber are prebiotics. So let's talk more about what prebiotics are. Prebiotics are food for the beneficial microbes that live in us. They provide health benefits by specifically altering either the composition or the function of the gut microbiota. They're found naturally in some foods, and they're added to some foods and dietary supplements. Most prebiotics are dietary fibers, but not all dietary fibers are prebiotics. Consuming at least 5 grams of prebiotics daily has been recommended for improved gut health. So most minimally processed plant foods will provide some amount of prebiotics, whether that's beans, legumes, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, or seeds. This slide provides examples of some of the highest food sources of prebiotics. We see here dandelion greens, Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, leeks, onions, asparagus, bananas, apples and berries, seeds and nuts, beans, peas, and lentils, whole grains such as barley, oats, and wheat bran, dark chocolate and cocoa, and chicory root. So example of some serving sizes that could provide that 5 grams of prebiotics would be half of a small onion, half a cup of dandelion greens, 4 cloves of garlic, or 3/4 cup cooked asparagus. Let's talk a little bit more about whole grains and how to identify whole grains when you're looking at a nutrition label on a product such as bread, crackers, cereal, or pasta. Primarily, the nutrition label and the ingredients are where you're going to find all of the information that you need. First off, looking at the ingredients to verify that you have a whole grain, the first word will be whole or sprouted in the ingredient list. Second, we can look at the nutrition facts label and use something called the 10-to-1 rule, which is the carb to fiber ratio. And you'll see that we've put a circle around the total carbohydrates and fiber on this nutrition facts. And when we say the 10-to-1 ratio, what we're looking for is for every 10 grams of carbohydrate, you have at least 1 gram of dietary fiber. So on this label, one serving provides 34 grams of carbohydrate and 4 grams of dietary fiber. So this product meets the 10-to-1 rule. We also want to look for breads and cereals that have at least 3 grams of dietary fiber per serving, and looking for less than 6 grams of added sugar per serving of, say, a breakfast cereal that might have some added sugar. Overall, the goal is to aim for less than 25 grams of added sugar daily. So as I mentioned earlier, prebiotics may be added to foods or sold as dietary supplements. The word prebiotics isn't always on the label. So what you can look for if you're looking to see if there's a prebiotic in a food is words like galacto-oligosaccharides or GOS, fructo-oligosaccharides or FOS, oligofructose, OF, chicory fiber, or inulin. And here's an example of a soda that has prebiotics added to it, and it's listed right on the front, prebiotic soda. And when you look at the ingredients, you would see one of these words in the ingredient list. Resistant starch is another form of foods that are really good for the gut bacteria. This is starch that resists digestion in the small intestine and has prebiotic properties in the large intestine. Other health benefits of resistant starch include improved blood sugar control and increased post-meal satiety. Resistant starch is fermented slowly, so it may cause less gas than other prebiotics. Food sources that include resistant starch include plantains and green bananas, beans, especially white beans and lentils, cooked and cooled grains such as rice, potatoes, beans, pasta, and oats, and then oats soaked in liquids such as overnight oats. Lastly, let's talk about some tips for managing tummy troubles from fiber and prebiotic. It's not uncommon to experience some gas, bloating, or a change in bowel movements when adding more dietary fiber and prebiotics into the diet, especially if cancer treatment has affected your GI system. So here are some tips. 1, a gradual increase in fiber and prebiotics improves tolerance. So instead of starting with a large salad that has several high fiber and prebiotic ingredients, we may want to introduce half a cup of a cooked vegetable into the diet as a way to sort of ease back into more high fiber, prebiotic rich foods. It's important to ensure adequate fluid intake because fluid helps our body digest and move the fiber and prebiotics through the system. Start with smaller portions. And the preparation method can make a difference. So cooking, chopping, blending may all improve tolerance to fiber and prebiotic-rich foods. Including bone broth is something that can help strengthen the gut barrier and help with healing the gut after it's been affected by cancer treatment. Mindful eating can also be very helpful. And mindful eating is the pausing, eating slowly, and chewing your food well, which really helps with digestion. Lastly, diaphragmatic breathing can help calm the digestive tract before eating. So diaphragmatic breathing or deep breathing before meals can activate the parasympathetic nervous system to promote relaxation and potentially ease digestive discomfort.
Now that we've learned about prebiotics, which are the food for our gut bacteria, we're going to learn a little bit more about probiotics, which are the live microorganisms themselves that have a variety of benefits in the body, including modulating the immune system, improving certain digestive symptoms. Specific probiotics can also reduce antibiotic-associated diarrhea and decrease common infections. And oftentimes you'll see probiotics listed by the genus, the species, and the strain. So the genus is the big family. That would be your lactobacillus or your bifidobacteria. Your species goes a step further, and for example, lactobacillus has many, including Lactobacillus acidophilus or Lactobacillus reuteri. And then your strain is where it gets a lot more condition dependent and gets a lot more specific. Usually you'll see it in the form of letters or certain numbers, and now most companies are actually including the strain on their supplement jar. But again, very condition dependent, so certain strains are being studied specifically for diarrhea or for constipation or certain infections like H. pylori or C. diff. Probiotics are found in many fermented foods, and fermented foods are made through desired microbial growth and enzymatic conversion of food components. And some fermented foods include things like yogurt, kefir, miso, natto, which is fermented soybean, tempeh, kimchi, sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, most kombuchas, most cheeses, and some beers. And they can supply you with really healthy probiotics. I did want to note that some fermented foods may undergo further processing, so things like pasteurization or baking or filtering after the fermentation process, and so are not necessarily a probiotic food. And that can include like a shelf-stable pickle, soy sauce, or vinegars. So although they do have a step of fermentation, they don't actually contain the live probiotic themselves, unlike this list here that's on the slide. I do encourage trying to get probiotics from your food if possible, but if you are interested in starting a probiotic supplement, here are some tips to consider. First, choosing a product that displays each strain's designation. So again, taking a look at that strain and seeing, is this the right strain I want for the benefit I desire? For example, maybe if you're trying to work on ways to handle constipation, looking for a strain that can help with constipation specifically. Next, verifying that the product contains at least the number of CFU, which is the colony-forming units of viable probiotic bacteria that have shown to be beneficial. And more doesn't always necessarily mean better, so we do encourage looking at the research for proper amounts of bacteria that can be beneficial. And then lastly, checking the use-by expiration date and storing your probiotic properly. Some probiotics do need to be stored in the refrigerator, so you would want to take a look at that. There's a lot of great probiotic resources that you can use. One that we really like is the Clinical Guide to Probiotic Products available in the USA. And this is a website that you can use to, again, filter out certain conditions to find a specific probiotic strain and brand. They actually even have brands associated with those strains that you could take a look at. Now let's talk about probiotic supplements in cancer treatment. Probiotics can be a therapeutic strategy for managing certain gastrointestinal side effects of cancer therapies, including things such as diarrhea, abdominal pain, constipation, bloating, or treatment-induced lactose intolerance. And there's been a review of 20 randomized control trials that have found that probiotics reduce treatment-related side effects in 85% of studies. So if this is something you're considering, always a good idea to discuss with your dietitian or doctor before you start. It is noted that people with severely impaired immune function should be cautious when using a probiotic due to a few case reports of linking probiotic supplement to sepsis. So again, discussing with a healthcare provider if that's right for you.
So now that we've discussed all of the dietary components that support the gut microbiome, here are a few things to keep in mind that can be harmful. These are what we call our microbiome disruptors and things we want to try to minimize. Studies have found that certain dietary patterns are linked with a disruption to the gut microbiome, specifically the Western diet. Now, the Western diet is high in refined grains, things like white flour products, pastries, hamburger buns, French fries, high in processed meats, sodium, and processed fats. It's also high in intake of added sugars, which can disrupt the microbiome. Additionally, artificial sweeteners, so this is regular and long-term consumption of artificial sweeteners, which are often found in soft drinks and processed foods. Examples would be sucralose and aspartame. They've actually been linked with intestinal dysbiosis in human subjects. And recent studies also suggest that regular and long-term consumption of certain food additives, such as polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose, which are found in various processed foods, can disrupt the microbiome and even affect and increase the incidence of metabolic syndrome and inflammatory conditions that negatively affect our gut health. Here are some resources if you want to learn more about gut health. So now we're going to prepare some gut healthy recipes for you. First, we're going to be doing a breakfast of overnight oats, and then we'll be showing you how to make a healthy gut-friendly dip or salad dressing. So let's start with the overnight oats.
Great. So these are the ingredients that we're going to use for our overnight oats recipe. We have an old-fashioned oats. We have some almond milk, but you could use any type of non-dairy or dairy milk if you'd like. We have some chia seeds, and then some extra boosters, things like cinnamon, blueberries, and walnuts.
Looks like we have some great prebiotic-rich foods, right?
Great prebiotics, yeah, a lot of fiber from the oats, from the nuts, from the chia seeds, and then definitely a lot of prebiotics in the chia. And what's great about this recipe too is that it takes about 30 seconds to make the night before, and it's ready the next day. So we love anything that's very easy to make. But we're gonna start with about 1/3 cup of oats. We'll put that right in your jar. And then we'll take almond milk, give it a shake.
So you're using 1 part oats and 2 parts?
1 part oat and then 2 parts milk for the best consistency we found, yeah.
And I love the fact that you can make this at night and then get up and go and just grab your breakfast and get out the door.
Definitely,
No
makes for really good meal prep if you're busy in the mornings, definitely. Okay, so we've added our oats and our almond milk, and now we're gonna add our 1 tablespoon of chia seeds, and it gives it a really nice texture and adds a lot of, like Greta mentioned, prebiotics and healthy fats and fiber for our gut. And then we learned a little bit about polyphenols and plant colors, so we're gonna add a little bit of cinnamon to add some color. And all you do is give that a mix.
I also love the cinnamon because it adds flavor, and then it's also going to make it taste a little sweet without adding any sugar, which is really nice.
Definitely. All right, so mixed, lid on, put in the refrigerator, and the next morning you will have something that looks like this. Might be a little hard to see, but a little bit more of like an oatmeal or pudding-like consistency, and ready the next morning. And you can top it with whatever toppings you'd like. So I think berries work really great, nuts and seeds work really well, but anything that you would like. Today we have blueberries, so we'll add that. I also like blueberries because, again, doesn't take a lot of prep. You can just simply add it on morning of.
And again, berries were one of our higher prebiotic foods. So we're really trying to get those prebiotic-rich foods to get that 5 grams a day. The berries are going to really help.
Definitely. And they got a rich color, that good blue color. So you got your polyphenols, and then the walnuts are great for taste. They add a little crunch, but they also can add protein, fiber, healthy fats.
And then if you wanted to pair this with a probiotic, which is one of the things we're trying to do, right, is eat probiotics and prebiotics at the same time, what would you recommend, Claire?
Yeah, I would say a great idea to add a probiotic would be to add a dollop of yogurt. And we actually have some examples here of good yogurt brands. So this one's Organic Nancy's low-fat probiotic yogurt. And you can see what's great about this is that it includes live active cultures on the yogurt. So you know that the probiotics were added back into the yogurt. So it'll add probiotics and a little bit of protein. If you don't use milk products, you could also use a non-dairy yogurt too to also get probiotics. So the one that we have today is Cocoa June. It's made with coconut milk, but still's got those probiotics in there. So that's an easy breakfast. And now Greta will transition to a really delicious green goddess dressing.
Yeah, that looks great, Claire. I'm excited to have that for breakfast tomorrow morning. So now we're gonna do a dip, or it could be a dressing, and we call this our gut-friendly green goddess kefir-based dressing. So we talked a little bit about kefir earlier, and what kefir is it's kind of I think of it as like a cross between buttermilk and yogurt. So it's like a liquidy yogurt, basically. It's loaded with probiotics, or live active cultures. And as Claire mentioned, you want to see that live active cultures listed on the front of your kefir or yogurt. And a lot of them actually list the specific bacteria strains that they use or have added back in after the pasteurization of the drink. So we're going to start with about a half a cup. Just need those measuring cups. We're going to start with about a half a cup of kefir. And if you're making a dip like we're doing today, about a half a cup is the recommended portion. Now, if you want to make this more of like a dressing that you can use to dress salads or dress like a Buddha bowl, for example, you're probably going to want to use more like a full cup, because it'll be too thick to really pour in as a dressing with just a half a cup. So we're going to take our probiotic ingredient, and then we're going to add a lot of prebiotics. So some of the prebiotics we're using today are garlic. So I've pre-chopped a couple cloves of garlic. We have green onions, and we're going to use one green onion, the white and green parts. Just throw that in. And then we have a full avocado. So that's one of the things that's going to make it really delicious. It's going to add a lot of healthy fat, some additional fiber. So I'm just going to get this avocado in there. And let me get the other half. Make it a little mess. Let's get that out.
And the avocado probably gives it a really creamy, delicious
really
consistency
creamy,
too.
gives it a nice color, nice bright green color. Okay, so we're getting the avocado in there. And then we're going to add some lemon juice and just a little pinch of salt. I'm just going to use about a quarter teaspoon, and this is kosher salt that I'm using.
So this is great. So far we already have our probiotic, our prebiotic, and it's not even over yet.
Right,
There's
so
more.
last we want to throw in the greens. The greens are going to give us another great source of prebiotics. So just a nice handful of parsley, and then cilantro. And you can just rip it, nothing, don't have to do any chopping, just keep it simple. And then that's pretty much it. We're going to put everything in the blender, lock down the blender, and blend until everything's creamy and smooth. So now I'm going to just scrape down the blender so I can get all the pieces of the herbs in there, get everything all blended up. And I really like, today we're going to be serving this with some chopped vegetables, some crudité, kind of something great that you could bring for a snack or bring to a party. But again, you could use it as a dressing. Have you used it ever as a dressing? Have you?
I've used it
before?
recently in a like a chicken and rice and veggie bowl, which was really good as like the dressing on top.
Great. Gave it a great flavor.
Definitely.
Some added benefits. Okay, so let's... Okay, I'm just going to do one more scrape, and then I think our dressing will be ready. Perfect.
I actually had this as a Super Bowl Sunday snack for my friends, and this was one of the most popular snacks
Nice.
out of all the
Nice.
appetizers that were made. This was a hit.
And for Super Bowl Sunday too, that's
I
impressive.
know.
Something healthy. And you can see it's got a nice green color. You can see these beautiful herbs in there. And you can blend it as much or as little as you want. So you can get it to a very smooth consistency. I'm keeping the herbs a little bit more chunky today.
Delicious.
Okay, there we
Looks
go.
Great.
And so we're going to serve that up with some veggies
Great.
and enjoy.
Thanks for making it. Looks beautiful.
You're welcome.
So those are two really great gut healthy recipes that we hope you're inspired to try at home. We also wanted to point out a few other foods or products that are also rich in probiotics, just for your reference. And Greta brought in this really delicious fermented vegetable. Maybe, have you tried this
It's
type?
delicious, yeah. And the thing about it's refrigerated, so if you're looking for a fermented vegetable to get your probiotics, we recommend getting something out of the refrigerator because the live active cultures are going to still be viable. You're going to get those benefits as opposed to like a shelf-stable pickle or something like that. So yeah, something like that would be great.
Yeah. And definitely adds a lot of flavor to like a veggie bowl or a salad, just a scoop of that, or even just eating a bite of it out of the jar can be really delicious too. And we also wanted to show you tempeh, which is a type of fermented soybean. This is another great source of probiotics that you can saute and put on a bowl or even use as like a protein source for like a salad and a variety of other things.
Yeah, this one actually is flavored, so they use some spices and they make it sort of like smoky, like a bacon flavor. So if you're somebody that really likes a bacon flavor, you could add it to a sandwich or a salad.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And then this drink.
Yeah, this is great. This is like a fermented, almost like a kombucha or a kefir that's not made from dairy. And it's made from a little bit of juice and carrots, basically. Has no added sugar. It's got some live active cultures, so it's a delicious beverage source of probiotics.
Yeah, it looks delicious. And then lastly, we just had a few probiotics that we wanted to show here. I mean, obviously you can see there's so many ways to get probiotics from your food, but if you are taking a supplement, this is what they can look like on the shelf. And as we mentioned, always good to talk to your healthcare provider or dietitian on what probiotic supplement would be right for you.
Thank you for joining us today. The recipes are in the links below, and check out our website for more information.
Thanks for joining.